In the last section of this chapter, we're going to talk about immunity. So, once your immune system has responded to a virus, now we're looking at the immunity or the ability to combat diseases and cancer. It can be brought about naturally through an infection or artificially through medical intervention. And there are two types of immunity: active and passive. Active immunity in the individual's body makes antibodies against a particular antigen. Remember, that's the foreign substance like the virus or the bacterium. It can either happen through natural infection. You're exposed to something, you get sick with it, your immune system responds, and then you remember you keep those memory B and T cells around. So if you were ever exposed again, you can ramp up the antibodies and prevent an infection a second time. The other way is through an immunization involving vaccines. This is where we inactivate one of those viruses and then expose your body to the antigen. But the secret is the antigen can't actually make you sick because we've immobilized it. But the protein is still there, or the antigen is still there. So your immune system goes through its normal response, making memory B and T cells, also giving you immunity. Exposure can either be a primary exposure, which is short lived and slower to respond, while a second exposure is usually the kicker that makes that much more rapid, strong response. This type of immunity is usually very long lasting, and it's dependent upon memory B and T cells. Here you can see an example of someone that's only getting that first vaccine right here. It does produce the antibodies. We do store some in the memory, but that's very low levels. The second dose of that vaccine is what kicks it into high gear. You can see in this particular instance, waited about 2 months, and now that secondary exposure is what's going to give you those levels that are high enough to prevent illness later. Passive immunity is where an individual is given the antibodies against a particular antigen. It's not really something that's going to last for a long time, but it will temporarily give you some protection. This can happen really naturally. So, like during pregnancy and breastfeeding, it's really normal for those antibodies to be passed from mother to baby. This is also why breastfeeding is so important. However, we have found ways to produce these antibodies and inject them. Now, again, it's not going to last long term, but one line of research has been to produce these antibodies that we can then give to military personnel so that if they're going into an area that has a really high rate of infection, if we have those antibodies, we can give them some immunity for a short period of time, say a month or two, allowing them to work in that area and not get sick. Again, won't be lifetime, but could be really valuable in that situation. Now, in this last bit, we want to talk about when the immune system goes awry. And so there are some examples of just being hypersensitive. So our immune system primarily is keeping bad stuff out, but every once in a while it works too well and it starts reacting to things that really shouldn't be a big deal. These three key issues would be allergies, tissue rejection, and then like immune system disorders. In allergies, you become hypersensitive to harmless substances like pollen, food, maybe animal hair. What's happened is, for some reason, when you have maybe gotten a cold, it was at the same time that tree pollen was around, and your body was like, oh no, I'm sick. And so it creates the antibodies not only for the cold, but it also creates antibodies for like the pollen. And then anytime you're exposed to it again, your body goes, oh my gosh, I'm being invaded, and it ramps up that immune response again. And you have that histamine response where you've got redness and swelling and watery eyes and inflamed nasal passages or wherever it is that you've been exposed. And so we see that histamine release that's causing those allergic responses. This is why you take an antihistamine if you're having an allergic reaction. In anaphylactic shock, you've got an allergic response that is so severe, it's occurring because the allergen has entered the bloodstream. It will actually cause blood pressure drops and can be quite life-threatening. And this is why you would have an EpiPen on hand, let's say if you were allergic to bees. Sometimes you'll get a delayed allergic reaction, like in poison ivy. It just takes a while for those memory cells to be activated and then to get that response. Another issue that we can sometimes have with hypersensitivity is tissue rejection. Um, it occurs when those cytotoxic T cells are responding to tissue that it's recognizing as non-self. But unfortunately, it's in a place where we have intentionally put, let's say, a kidney transplant. So we've put someone else's kidney into the body, and then the body's trying to reject it as non-self. We can control that by using immunosuppressive drugs, but of course, in suppressing the immune system's response to rejecting the kidney, you're also, or whatever organ we've transplanted, we're also causing it to have a lower immune response to other illnesses as well. So you'd be more likely to get sick. One line of research is trying to grow organs in the lab so they could be transplanted with a lot less rejection. And then lastly, we have some disorders of the immune system. Uh, Things like autoimmune disease, where the body is overreacting, and you actually start thinking that the body thinks that its own tissue is an invader. And so this is where you can see something like MS, where it starts attacking the myelin sheath of the nerves. So it makes it much harder for the nerve signal to be moved, or in rheumatoid arthritis, where it's attacking the joints and making the joints become inflamed, and the immune system is actually eating away at them. So that's an overactive immune system. The other direction is immunodeficiency, and this is with something like AIDS, where the immune system itself has been compromised. HIV is a virus that directly attacks the immune system itself. A cold virus might attack the respiratory tract. You can have intestinal bugs, but in HIV, it's the actual immune system that's being attacked. And so those lines of defenses eventually just can't keep up anymore. And so a lot of times people will succumb to another illness, even though they're dying from AIDS. It's from not responding to other illnesses. Well, with that, that wraps up the chapter on the lymphatic system. Thank you, guys.